mean, coming from a female who's been in the military, I mean, when I served my first command, women had only been allowed on surface ships for 10 years.
So you were in the Navy.
Yeah. And I definitely felt the backlash of the older generation not accepting me. It was not entirely fun at first.
Can you elaborate on that? Help people understand what do you mean by the older generation wasn't willing to accept you? Like what was your day-to-day experience with being a female, and what your perception of the environment and those individual experiences were?
Well, coming from an all-male crew, I was in aviation. I wasn't on ships per se. We went to the ships, but most of the time we worked from a hangar bay.
Lucky you.
And yeah, and even that, it was a male-dominated job, and it was guys that didn't really want the females there. So guess who had all the crappy jobs? Anything that got me dirty, anything that was heavy, anything that would make me miserable, I got volunteered for. I had to work twice as hard to be half as good. I mean, I guess it made me a better person, but it wasn't fair because I didn't get the better evals, and you could see who was putting in the work and who wasn't. And some of the other sailors actually argued with the eval process because we see who works and who doesn't.
And for everyone's understanding, you're talking about evaluation for promotion opportunities?
Yes.
Got it. And it's interesting that you say that. I'd like to go back a little bit and kind of touch on something you said, because sometimes the way we perceive the world around us isn't always, it's our own reality, but it's not everybody else's. What makes you say that the male sailors in particular, that they did not want you there?
Because they flat out told me.
Okay. Do you remember it? Because those are pretty harrowing experiences when people actually say that type of thing, whether it comes from a place of insecurity or whether it comes from a place of just some sort of deep-seated, I don't know why. I mean, the military is an interesting environment, but can you kind of elaborate on at least one or two of those experiences where somebody actually directly told you that, and like what led up to that?
Well, we had a lot of sexual assaults and, to be honest, rapes in the hangars, or not the hangars, but the barracks, our housing.
Yeah.
And I got sexually assaulted, and one of my friends, she got raped. And then one of the first classes, who's supposed to be a supervisor, walked up to us and said, "Are we offending your delicate nature?" Because I mean, the guys got Maxim magazines and stuff like that, and some of the things guys say when women aren't around, it's not offensive to me. I don't care, but I mean, people could be offended by it, and it's not always the most professional environment.
Right.
But having somebody come up to me and say that, who I'm supposed to look up to, and then every time you turn around, "Oh, am I offending you? Oh, am I offending you?" And it's not a genuine like, "Oh, did I upset you?" It's they were acknowledging my presence to be smug.
Got it. And this happened at work, and this was involved with there was some display, because I mean, my experience in the military is it has become a very PC environment, and in a workspace environment, there's usually a lot of restrictions about displaying, like you said, Maxim magazines or any sort of sexually related material. So was there some incident that happened, and then somebody approached you and just took it upon themselves to make an assessment that you were offended? Or I guess I'm trying to better understand the experience that actually happened. I got somebody that came up to you and said, are we insulting your delicate nature? But what was and that there's been some sexual assaults and actual rapes that happened.
They called us out as basically rats. So instead of keeping our mouth shut, we got people in trouble. And they expected us to stay silent. For
reporting the sexual assaults?
Yeah.
Okay. And the military, for those that aren't familiar with it, the military has a lot of, as far as reporting goes, they do have a lot of like non-disclosure agreements. So, somebody that reports rape, they can do it anonymously. You do not have to divulge your name. And then, if a rape is reported, if a sexual assault is reported, the standard operating procedure, is that there will be an investigation conducted into the, obviously the validity of the claims. Hopefully, the victim would have, taken herself to the hospital immediately to get a rape kit done. But obviously, once the investigation is completed, or even during, if that individual, male or female, because both men and women do encounter sexual assault in the military, they can move commands. They can be relocated for their own personal safety or security. So to dealing with that environment and having the females be outcast as tattletales or as rats or as snitches, obviously that's not conducive to a healthy working environment. So it was just something that occurred after the fact. Somebody had reported a sexual assault allegation, and then the general, I guess, experience that you had was that the other, I'd be surprised, was it coming from like the junior enlisted, or was this like a command thing? Do you think this came from a higher echelon, that this attitude towards women shifted as soon as somebody reported something?
Well, it started with a couple of the E6s, and it just kind of went down because, the people who joined the Navy with females in it kind of were used to us, but it was it started from above and went down. The CO didn't really put up with it, but it did make it awkward, and I really didn't want to make it any more awkward, so I just kind of dealt with it until the end of that tour, and I transferred.
Got it. Did you make a choice to transfer to a different unit based on your experience as far as gender is concerned?
No, it was just my time to rotate. The next squadron wasn't much better, but it did eventually get better to where I was in a helicopter squadron, and we did stuff all over the place. Like one of the times we worked with SEAL Team 5, and I was the only female on that detachment that went out with them.
Got it.
Yeah, it definitely changed a bit, but...
So from your experience, it can vary. It kind of just depends on the command climate, depending on...
Yeah, I'd been known to have to carry, there's like a couple 115-pound boxes, and it's supposed to be 2 or 3 man carry, but when you're on a ship, there's not a whole lot of space for those 3 people to grab.
Right.
So it was just a pick it up and go.
Now, my experience in the Marine Corps with the gender issue, it was, like you say, it was sometimes a constant issue, whether because it was a command climate issue in terms of how we were interacting with each other, or it was just the perception was given by the amount of annual training that we had to do on sexual, SAPR training, sexual assault prevention and response training. It almost seemed constant. And like you point out, these types of incidents, these, sexual assaults and rapes do happen. Certainly in the commands that I was in, they did maybe occur, once in a while, but it was usually a service-wide event. When some report came out, or when something came out from anywhere in the world about, an increase in sexual assault, it was just kind of commonplace to cease training for a while, and put everybody in a lecture for a few hours, regardless of where the event, occurred. So it kind of had a ripple effect. But I'd like to discuss maybe your take on, why do you think that this exists? Because, sexual assault and rape certainly aren't exclusive to the military. They happen in, we're both in college now. The reporting is that some percentage of women, 3 out of 10 women will be raped in college or something like that. So it's obviously more than just a military issue, but from your experience, why do you think that this exists? Like, why do you think that attitude towards women existed at your command or just in general?
That's a sociological issue. That could come from the way you're raised as a kid to, not be told no or not take no for the proper answer. And in the case that seems to be popular is, oh, she asked for it. Oh, she was dressed like this. And I was like, I was in uniform when it happened. I was like, the only thing that was showing were my hands and face. So it's like, that's not an excusable answer. There's really no excuse anyway, but it's just taking what you want and you weren't supposed to have.
Well, I'm speaking because in my experience, I mean, the men are more likely to say something than they are to do something. And I think the environment that happens, so, sexual harassment is more commonplace than actual assault. Unless the assault happens in the form of just some sort of inappropriate touching, but it's, not classified as somebody like being pinned down and, in that kind of scenario. But what I'm speaking more to is because that's more of the, I don't want to say the minority what am I? I'm not trying to diminish it, but what I'm speaking to is the general environment, that the treatment that you receive, not that individual experience, but just in general. You said that the command environment did not want you there, that the other sailors, they did not want you there. I mean, what do you think breeds that attitude towards women in the military?
I mean, that's just, again, it's a sociological thing. When you have the good old boys club, nobody wants that broken. When they have a good thing going, they can talk how they want when their wives are around. They can be who they want to be and not apologize. And it changes when you have a different gender. I mean, yeah, I've worked with some people where it's like you sneeze and they're offended. And that just gets annoying. Nobody wants to work with that. And some people know that you have a certain amount that you're going to have to put up with, just because you can't stop somebody from being who they are and you can't make them apologize. But there's certain boundaries that should be set that, hey, that's not professional. You shouldn't be doing it.
Certainly. So if I gather correctly, your take on it is that men are inherently carnal in nature in terms of their expression, especially among each other. And I've been experienced to it. Men there's some dirty old men out there. And It doesn't matter. I mean, it's the nature of the environment. A lot of sex jokes, a lot of crudeness, a lot of vulgarity. You can even see it in our media too. I mean, it's just a thing with men. But the take is that men in their carnal nature are threatened by having women in the working environment, because then they have to basically cease their own self-expression, because women are, in a PC environment, women are either by experience more likely to be offended, or they have reportedly been more offended and made remarks, and made it an issue.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't even just the gender thing. Sometimes it was, you can't lift as much as we can, or you can't do this as good as we can. And I mean, we all had the same training. It didn't really matter. It's like, if I couldn't pick something up, I would go use a cart. That's the concept they didn't seem to grasp, but I think it was just having to change their ways, like you said. And if you're molded into a certain way and forced to change, I mean, some people don't bend. And I mean, again, it could be a generational issue, because those who were brought up with the female in the military sometimes would just roll with the older jokes, and others would actually hold their tongue. But it just depends on who we dealt with. I mean, that's the same with rape. I mean, not every guy is just going to go take advantage of somebody like that, or even every woman. It's just there's those few out there that do stuff like that, and they think they can get away with it.
Or they're just not thinking. I would have to imagine that rape is usually circumstantial. I don't know how many people are out there plotting rape, but
no,
but I get what you said. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, so moving forward, I mean, what do you think, if not already being done? Because I've certainly sat through a lot of ethics and ethos training and general, especially with racism, as well as just cultural, issues within the military, and because you have a very broad mixing pot of different people. What would you think the solution is moving forward?
I mean, you've even said it. Every single time we had a stand down, there was something about sexual assault, because it kept happening. And it was like, hey, let's keep beating a dead horse, but it kept happening. Mm-hmm. Or else we wouldn't have to go through those things so much. And I mean, I got sick of hearing about it too.